The 1980s was a time known for its darker kids films, whether it be Neverending Story, E.T., or Dark Crystal. There was just something appealing about a children's film that did not look down on its target audience. While there were many dark kids films to come from this era, it's really no contest which one of these films was considered to be the most terrifying, not just by kids, but adults alike. Return to Oz is a film that was released in 1985. It is often referred to as a sequel to the classic 1939 Wizard of Oz, which is not entirely true as it was produced by Disney and not MGM, and there are countless differences between the two films. But this movie was likely made under the assumption that its target audience had seen the original or at least read the book, so in that sense, I guess you can still call it a sequel. Return to Oz is an absolutely terrifying film, but it's also one that's wondrous and beautiful. It's a hidden gem that deserves to be seen by the rest of the world. It picks up several months after the events of the original book. Dorothy is now in a depressive state, and her Aunt Em and Uncle Henry worry about her sanity as she keeps going on about all of her adventures she had in the land of Oz. They decide to take her to a doctor who thinks the only way to help her is to give her shock treatment.
You need a bit of shock treatment. Gets you jumping like a real live wire. Need a bit of shock treatment.
Now, ignoring the fact that that's completely disturbing, what I do actually like about this is how grounded in reality the opening is. Dorothy really does come off as crazy when she's talking about wicked witches of the West and Tin Woodsmen getting their limbs cut off. I don't really see Aunt Em as completely evil, but more so somebody just worried for their child. Maybe taking her to get a shock treatment is a bit much, especially considering Dorothy's age, but whatever, you gotta have a movie. Aunt Em is also portrayed by Piper Laurie, you know, the mother of Carrie. Right before she can receive the treatment, a storm appears and the power in the building goes out. Dorothy is rescued by a girl, later revealed to be Princess Ozma, and the two of them jump into the river to get away. Dorothy wakes up in Oz with her pet chicken, Billina, who, being in Oz, can now speak, and discovers that the land of Oz is now in ruins.
No, Billina, you don't understand. This was the yellow brick road.
She meets a few new friends along the way as they try to restore Oz to its former glory while evading the evil clutches of both Princess Mombi and the Gnome King. Return to Oz is actually a combination of two L. Frank Baum books, The Marvelous Land of Oz and Ozma of Oz. It doesn't follow the books exactly, but borrows many elements from them, combining them more into one story. The two books also did not feature Dorothy, but the movie did, and it's likely just because Dorothy is the character people are most familiar with, and to be honest, a story where she returns to Oz is not such a bad idea. Return to Oz is, once again, a terrifying movie. I'm sure any of you familiar with the film has heard that 1,000 times, but it's true. The film is a borderline horror film, and the fact that this was made with the intention of being for kids just makes it all the more terrifying. The idea of Dorothy receiving shock treatment at the beginning is horrific enough, but the way in which the hospital scenes are shot feel just like a horror movie. You can even hear the screams of patients in the background.
I'll see to that. You check the generator.
And as if reality were not bad enough, Oz itself is a beautiful nightmare. Both of the villains are creepy in their own way, especially Mombi, who has a collection of living heads and switches them out depending on her own mood. The scene in which Dorothy steals Mombi's powder of life is especially nightmarish.
Dorothy,
The Gnome King can also be very creepy at times. He switches between being a stop motion effect and an actor in makeup throughout the film. The stop motion is the uncanny aspect of it and is actually done by the Will Vinton studio. You know, the people behind the California Raisins. He gets his own really horrific scene towards the end, and it feels straight out of The Evil Dead. And I can't forget to mention the Wheelers, because I think that's the part that scared people the most. Me, not so much, but I can still see why people would be so afraid of them. I mean, just look at them. Even Dorothy's friends in Oz are a bit creepy. There's a mechanical man named Tick-Tock, Jack Pumpkinhead, who's a tall, thin, scarecrow-like character with a jack-o'-lantern for a head, and the head of a gump that was brought back to life by the powder of life and is tied to objects such as a couch in order to move around. Now, despite me calling them creepy, they are actually all very sweet, and you learn to love each and every one of them as the film goes on. There are some really tender moments between Dorothy and her new friends, just as there were in the original film. The least frightening of Dorothy's friends is probably her chicken. What's actually interesting about the chicken is how it creates parallels to the first film. In the original film, the red ruby slippers, or silver in the book, acted as the MacGuffin. As it turned out, Dorothy could have used them the whole time to return home. In this film, it's the chicken that they do not discover until the end is poisonous to gnomes.
Don't you know that eggs are poison?
Poison indeed.
Poison. Poison to gnomes.
The fact that much of this film is terrifying acts more as an advantage than a disadvantage. I think one of the things that makes the original film so memorable is, while it was full of happy moments, a lot of people remember at least one thing about it that used to scare them. There's that constant feel of dread throughout this film. You really do get the sense that Dorothy is in danger. This is a very different kind of film from the original. There's no sign of bright colors or cheerful songs. Much of the movie is rather depressing, but when the film isn't being horrific, it's actually very beautiful. The visuals of this film make for this captivating combination of both realism and surrealism. The film fully succeeds at transporting its audience to an entirely different world. The 1939 film is beautiful in its own way, but still feels more like you're watching a staged production. The Land of Oz in this film manages to feel more vast, like there's an entire world out there and we've only been able to see a smaller portion of it. The production design on this film is incredible. The costumes and puppetry used are a work of art and fully capture the look of Oz from the illustrations John R. Neal did for Baum's books. Something I've never been able to understand is why so many adaptations of Baum's books would rather try to profit off of the success of the original Oz film than try to adapt such imaginative literature. Now, I know the obvious reason for this is that people are more familiar with the 1939 film than the books themselves, but Return to Oz is the only Oz film I know of that seems to really care about what it's adapting. It knows that there's so much more to the Land of Oz that we all take for granted. The film was directed by Walter Murch. He's most known for his work in sound editing and classic movies like American Graffiti and Apocalypse Now. Return to Oz was both the first and last feature film he directed. It's fairly common knowledge that this film was mostly panned by critics upon its release. Many of the criticisms seemed really unfair, stating that the film was A, not on par with the original, and B, too scary for kids. The film didn't make much money either, which didn't help much. It is because of those criticisms that Walter Murch didn't pursue his career in directing, which is a real shame.
It was not financially successful, and it was perceived as being a kids' film, and kids were running from the theaters in tears, being scared by it. So I was box office poison for a number of years afterwards. Certainly as a director, I tried to get a number of projects off the ground, but was not successful.
While I do love this movie, I am also able to admit that it has its faults. There were 3 minor problems I had with the film that I could quickly summarize. 1, I found the chicken to be kind of annoying at times. 2, this line.
Belina,
What?
if only we could just fly away like you.
Only in my younger days, my dear.
And 3, the exposition given towards the end of the film feels very rushed.
She is Ozma, queen and rightful ruler of Oz. Her father was king of Oz before the wizard came.
Ozma grew up as Mombi's slave. But when the Gnome King promised Mombi 30 beautiful heads if she kept Ozma a secret, she enchanted her into the mirror.
But those are 3 minor complaints that did not affect my overall enjoyment of the movie. I'd actually say that Return to Oz is a wonderful film, and one that should be congratulated for its ability to take viewers to a whole nother world and do things most films for children would never dream of doing. The movie also contains themes that I feel really connected with me. The whole movie is about Dorothy trying to hold on to her imagination while everyone else wants to take it away from her. The end of the film signifies her learning to mature while still saving room for her more imaginative side. It's a fairly obvious message, but one that's of great importance, that no one has the right to take away your creativity, so long as it's not harming you or those around you. Return to Oz is an excellent work of art. It's a film that made me feel emotional just for how much love and hard work was put into making it. You can tell that those involved in its production really cared about bringing Baum's books to life. I strongly recommend Return to Oz to just about anyone. Well, maybe not its target demographic, but anyone above the age of 10. There's no other film quite like it, and there likely never will be.
Thinking nothing at all. She said, is this the return to Oz? The grass is dead, the gold is brown, and the sky has claws.